Hello, my name's Robin Vincent and welcome to the April edition of Molten Music Monthly. Yes, we've got a whole load of stuff to go through this month in my roundup of what was new, exciting and interesting in the month of April in terms of music technology, synthesis, software and Eurorack. There's no better way to keep your finger on the pulse than to stay right here with me. This month we've got a whole barrel load of Eurorack, we've got some synthesizers, got a load of software and stuff, and a brand new hardware sequencer that's rather unexpected. So let's get on with it. So kicking us off is the latest Behringer controversy, which will be forever known as Plastic-gate. Now this came out of a very weird space. What happened, right? It was that a few weeks ago at the Thomann synth Reaktor thingy, I was able to grab a bunch of Behringer gear and sat down with DivKid and Noir A Blanc V and chat about the MS-101, the Pro One and the Crave. It was great. Half an hour, just sat down, chat about it, talk about it, play a few notes and bits and pieces and just see what we thought. And one of the things that came out of it was trying to find words to describe the difference between these synths. And the word that we used for the MS-101 was plastic. Plasticky. It sounds a bit plasticky. Now the thing is that the SH-101 has always sounded a bit plasticky. But by that, what I mean, what we mean, what people generally mean, is that it has a tension to it, it has an elasticity to it, it has a bounce to it. And the word plastic just sort of reveals itself as being an interesting way to describe that SH-101 sort of tone. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago, Behringer released an official Behringer video which kind of took the piss out of that. And me specifically.
Does it sound plastic?
Plasticky is the word I like to use for the 101.
Because it has a plasticky sound.
Sort of like a balloon when you kind of you rub like the side of the balloon. You kind of like you know, which is sort of that plasticky thing, like you said.
Plasticky is
the plasticky.
Okay, so let's tackle the first question. Does this sound plastic?
It stole a few bits of video from that video and also a little bit that I did to camera for them directly at Thomann, where I said, yeah, these are great, I quite like this, and the MS-101 sounds a bit plasticky. And they sort of took, or at least appeared to take great exception to this, and did a video telling us why it doesn't sound plastic at all and how that's the wrong use of the term. And the video was cut in such a way to make me look pretty stupid. It was just weird. You don't expect a manufacturer to kind of assassinate you like this. Perhaps. It's kind of playing at being a YouTuber, which is not really what they should be doing necessarily. Anyway, after the initial kind of shock, I started then defending myself a little bit in the comments saying, well, that's not really how we meant it or how I meant it. And actually we quite like the MS-101 and it does have this tone and it is a bit plastic. And then a conversation emerged between myself and DivKid as well and Patrick, who's the guy who did the Behringer video, and a couple of things were realised. First of all, I realised that they were actually trying to be funny. They were making a joke. They were just poking a bit of fun and having a bit of a laugh. And the second thing that was realised was that Patrick understood that it didn't actually come across that way. And so Behringer took down the video, they rejigged it, reslapped it about and stuck it up again with a much better cut, which is actually mildly funny and interesting and is more deliberately messing about with our comments in a nice way, in a friendly way, which is what they always intended in the first place.
Now just to be clear guys, you know us at Behringer like to poke a bit of fun, and those YouTubers there in that video, which is Molten, Modular, DivKid and Noir A Blanc V, check them out on YouTube. They didn't mean the word in a negative sense.
It made it perfect for house bass lines.
It was purely more of a description of the characteristic of this classic sound.
It was just kind of initially a bit of a weird one. I mean, you know, I showed the video to the other YouTubers from Thomann, all going, what on earth is this about? It just seems a bit out of order. I didn't really mind that much. I wasn't like hurt or cut by it or anything. It just seemed a really odd way for Behringer to behave, considering how nice I was being about their products most of the time. But anyway, it's all sort of worked out nicely, and as I say, they've redone the video, and it's much calmer now and cooler, and talks about it in a nicer way, and doesn't make me look anywhere near as kind of stupid, which is always nice. And so to the term plastic. Is it plastic? Does it sound plasticky? Well, I'm going to find out, because I have one here that I bought myself, which probably goes some way to showing how much I feel that the term plastic is not a derogatory term. So I wouldn't buy one if I thought it sounded a bit crap. I think it sounds great. And I'm going to be doing a full review on that soon, and we can get to the bottom of this plasticness, you know, if anybody really cares. But I'd also like to give just a quick shout out to those people who commented on those Behringer videos in sort of defense of me and what I'd said, and pointed out the fact that this is a bit weird. That was really nice. It's comforting to get that sort of response. And also to the people who said I'm just a bit of a twat, but well, you know, we can't have everything. Right, first off the bat, for some really complicated Eurorack stuff. I mean, complexity in the actual naming of the modules, let alone anything else. Am I talking about noise engineering? Yeah, well, I will do in a second, but first, let's try this one. It's the Rosum Electro Panharmonium Mutating Spectral Resynthesizer. Oh yes, it is. So what the heck is it? Well, who knows, because it's a Rosum Electro one, and what you tend to get is a big wad of a module with a load of knobs on it, a load of text, in the kind of way that an engineer would appreciate as opposed to a designer. But what it does, it takes audio in, analyzes it, and then stuffs that information into 33 other oscillators. The idea being that it's, you know, analyzes, it slices, it cuts stuff up, it takes out pitch information, and then it re-synthesizes the sound using this swarm, this bank of multiple oscillators, as it tries to re-synthesize the spectrum that it's analyzed. So you could theoretically put in any sort of audio, you know, voice, guitar, any kind of sound at all can go in here. It'll extrapolate the frequency spectrum and then re-synthesize that with all these oscillators. And you can choose from multiple waveforms. You have mixing controls and blurring controls depending on how you want that all to go back together again. Now, I haven't actually heard this yet. I mean, I'm hoping that Superbooth will reveal exactly what is going on in all of this, but it sounds incredibly complex and incredibly interesting. And I'm looking forward to finding out more about it. Noise engineering then. Oh joy, some more awesomely named modules. Now, we saw these at NAMM sort of coming along the way, but now they've just become available. And there seems to be 3 of these that they're doing together at the same time, although with very different functions. The other thing to note is that they're coming with black panels, which is the first time Noise Engineering have moved beyond their silver and black, now into black and black. Or is it black and silver? Or black and white? I don't know. Anyway, they're now mostly black. So what do these 3 things do? Well, there's the Sync Bucina. Bucina could be, I don't know. Well, this is a low-pass gate. That's nice and simple. It's 100% analog, but it doesn't actually use Vactrals. It's all done instead with the clever use of dynamics. Stick your audio in, just a couple of parameters, and it comes out as a kind of a plucked feel to it. It has a velocity-dependent trigger for added dynamics, and there's an inbuilt filter section. Next up is Terci Ruina, I think. And this is a nice big fat distortion model. It has 3 different types of distortion all running together in parallel or series, or something. Anyway, you can string them together for just crunch and then more crunch. They say that it's awesome, ridiculous, and untamed, and I'm inclined to agree. And then finally, the big one. Big fat one. We saw this, didn't really have much of a front panel at NAMM, but now it does, and I still don't really have any idea what it does. But it's called, let's go for this one, it's called the Cursus Iteratas Percedo, I think. It seems to be some kind of complex wavetable oscillator with a whole bunch of envelope stuff built in. Or is it just envelopes? I don't know, I can't get my head around it. I mean, people say, oh yeah, well, it's a bit like the original Iteratas Percedo. So I don't really know what that does either, but I thought that was a wavetable thing. Or is it not? I don't know. Hopefully, at Superbooth, I might get a chance to try it out, and then I'll have a clue what it is I'm talking about. I love what Noise Engineering do. It just boggles my mind most of the time. So please feel free to fill me in on what these are about in simple, you know, childish language in the comments. This is a brand new synth from Analogue Solutions that I was fortunate enough to get a go of. He sent it to me. He sent it to me for a couple of weeks. I had a bit of a play and I made a video all about it. I've even written it up as a review for Sound on Sound magazine, which will be out in a month or two. It's called Impulse Command, and it's a very different thing. It's an analog synthesizer, subtractive analog synthesizer. Got a couple of oscillators, a sub, some noise, got a couple of filters, a couple of envelopes, a couple of LFOs. It all sounds kind of on the face of it quite normal, quite what you'd expect from any kind of monosynth. And it is a monosynth, it's just the one sound going on, although you would never really believe that once you hear this thing in action, because it's mad, it's nuts what's going on in here. If I try to put it into a nutshell for you, there's two oscillators. First oscillator does normal stuff. Second oscillator just messes with that first one, more or less all the time. Sub just goes, whoom, brings everything out. Then it goes into this dual filter thing. You've got one filter, then you've got an offset to it. So as you move that first filter, the second one goes with it, but you can move this one also independently. It moves around here like this. But the interesting thing is that this one is panned left and this one is panned right. So as you move these things about, it changes the stereo fields. You've got something going on over here and then something going on over here. And they start to sound different, and you can modulate them independently. So you've got this one moving about and this one not moving about, or sweeping, or this or that. And this creates this sort of illusion of multiple melodies going on, because the filters are creating their own sort of melodies, their own stuff going on. Meanwhile, you've got the actual pitch information on the normal oscillator doing its thing while being cross-modulated and annoyed by the second oscillator. Yeah, it's interesting. It has this built-in sequencer, which is really designed for modulation. So you direct it to the filter cutoffs, and that's what gets this movement and this modulation stuff going around, because the sequencer is doing that. You can route the sequencer to pitch, but it's not really designed for that. What it wants you to do is to bring MIDI in. And that in itself is quite unusual, because most desktop synths these days are fiercely analog. I'm going to be analog and I'm going to stick CV into everything, which is great, that's fine, you do that. But the Impulse Command has that, has a bunch of CV patching, that sort of thing, but it also responds really well to MIDI. So by that I mean that you can map MIDI velocity to different parameters within the synth. That's interesting in itself, and it has a little MIDI sequencer built in. So you can take 16 notes from MIDI, play them in, blah, 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 and loop that round continuously. So you have this step sequencer, which is dealing with the modulation, and you have a separate MIDI sequencer running something else. And that again gives you this further illusion of a tune going on and then different tunes being played by the filters. It's great. It's really, really great. But it doesn't end there. There's also a bunch of effects at the end, reverb, delays, flange, that kind of thing. And then there's this weird patch knob, and this patch knob does some weird shenanigans behind the scenes and connects various things up, or makes various connections. It patches stuff for you, basically. But the manual and Analog Solutions won't really tell you what they are, what's actually going on. You just have to feel your way through it. So as you turn it, it creates different sounds, percussion sounds coming in. The filters seem to be backwards in something, or the envelopes have been kicking in. It's really interesting. And you can modulate that from your step sequencer. So you can have it doing different things, and that creates a very rhythmic, very percussive thing beneath all of the modulated pitch stuff that's going on. So yeah, that's the condensed version of the review, but do go and check out my video, which has got lots and lots of sound examples, lots of demonstrations, and hopefully it will get across how exciting and interesting this very creative synthesizer is. Because I mean, that's the key to it. Because with most synthesizers, they go, there you go, oscillator, filter, bit, you know, do your thing. And you have access to every parameter of everything that's there. And that's fine, and off you go, blank page, start patching things together and making a sound. With the Impulse Command, a lot of creative decisions have been made for you. So this is routed to here, and this is routed to here, and those things are already done. And that in some ways means it's perhaps less versatile, but it pushes you into using it in a certain way, which generates this rhythm and this energy and this stuff that's going on. And I find that really interesting, because otherwise, I mean, all synthesizers are getting a bit samey. Is it okay to say that? I don't know. And so we need to start thinking and finding different ways of presenting ultimately the same thing over and over again. Here's another synthesizer, here's another synthesizer. Well, what's this one do? Well, the same as the last one. So I think it's awesome that Analog Solutions have decided to do something different and approach it in a different way. It's a chunky thing, it's an expensive thing, but wow, it's a whole lot of fun to play with, and I was really sad to give it back. 10-Tone Music have released a little desktop sampler, quite unexpectedly. 10-Tone Music have up to now been making these Eurorack modules, which are all in a very similar form factor that have different firmwares inside. So there's one that's an effects box, one that's a sequencer, one that's something else, can't quite remember. But they've taken that essentially and stuffed it into a little desktop box and turned it into a sampler, which is very interesting. I mean, it's a good old-fashioned type sampler, the idea being you sample stuff in it and you play it. It's very real-time, very performance-orientated. It uses their touchscreen technology in order to give you access to different cells and different bits and pieces, and then there's a row of buttons that do different functions. Surrounding it are 4 knobs for parameter changes, and off you go. The idea behind it is definitely for speed and fluidity. So you sample straight in, throw it to a cell, you can trigger that immediately. Or you can slice it up and stick it across the pads and then play bits individually. It has an inbuilt sequencer, inbuilt drum machine style things, inbuilt effects, all the sort of things you'd expect to find in a bit of a hardware sampler, but it's simple, obvious, there on the screen. It's not trying to be the most awesome deep level sampler of all time. It's just get stuff in, mess it about, send it back out again. And I think that appeals a great deal. Also the fact that it's just a little box as opposed to big rack mounted samplers and big hardware controllers you tend to get in hardware samplers. So I'm really appreciating the compact nature of it. I find this one a little bit weird. This is SoundForce. Now they make controllers for specific virtual instruments. On one hand, it's completely genius. On the other hand, it seems kind of superfluous somehow. I don't know, let me try to explain. What they've done is that they've taken the Yuhi Repro 1 VST instrument and they've created a MIDI controller for it. Not just, you know, a MIDI controller, but sort of a hardware control recreation of the Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which is what the Repro 1 is based upon. So it looks every bit like a real hardware synthesizer, but it's actually just a MIDI controller. So there's nothing inside the box, it's just mapped to MIDI and then goes into your computer. But it looks flipping fabulous. It looks like a Pro 1. And if you connect it up to your computer running Repro 1, you start playing on the hardware and it does everything that the software does. Fantastic. That's what I mean. It's genius. Except you can also do that with any MIDI controller. You can map any bunch of knobs to the controls in a VST instrument. No problem. And so it just seems like an extravagant use of desktop space to have a dedicated controller dedicated to a single VST plugin when you are liable to have lots and lots of different synthesizers. But of course you can map it to that, but it wouldn't quite be the same. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, it's an elegant thing, and if you can afford it, because at around 300 quid, it ain't cheap. And for about that, you could probably buy the Behringer Pro 1 when it comes out, which will be a hardware analog version of an actual synthesizer, as opposed to a MIDI controller controlling an emulated virtual version of something. You've also had to buy the plugin as well in the first place. That adds further cost to it, which is like another 150 quid. So, I don't know, 450 quid for a virtual version and a virtual MIDI controller hardware thing versus buying the Behringer Pro 1 actual hardware synthesizer. I don't know. I mean, I admire the balls of SoundForce. I think they've done a great job and the hardware seems flipping awesome. I just struggle to get my head fully around it, I think. Now, the 4MS Spectral Wavetable Navigator has been legendarily overdue. For years, I think we saw it at Superbooth 2016. And what this is, right, is it's a nice big Eurorack module with a big knob in the middle, 6 knobs at the top, and there are 6 wavetables, I think. So different sounds that are then scattered in space, and you can navigate your way around the spatialness of the wavetable thing in a spherical kind of way, and that then dictates what sort of sound you hear. So you can morph brilliantly between these 6 different sound sources within this 3D space. Wonderful. What a wonderful idea. It was a wonderful idea back then. It stays to be a wonderful idea now. And actually it's come on a great deal. It's just taken such a long time to develop this thing and get it out there. When it seemed to be finished 3 years ago, 3 years ago, I thought, wow, great, looking forward to that. But now down the line, it's still interesting. It's just weird how it's taken so long. Now it's going to get its big reveal, I imagine, at Superbooth this year. Although there are already videos out there of people using it. The Superbooth is the place where hopefully I get to go and have a try. But it certainly looks like a very exciting module. It's always been an exciting module. It now has more lights and more knobs than it had before, which makes it even more exciting. More modulation, more wavetables, more spherical space. That's what we like. Softube Modular has grabbed a little bit more of a Buchla. They already took a complex oscillator from them and slapped that into their wonderful modular Eurorack virtual environment thingy. They've now taken a second module. This one is a biggie. It's huge. One of the most expensive modules I think you could possibly hope to ever purchase if you are someone who had hardware Buchla. But this is the 296E Spectral processor. What is it? Well, it's a big sort of filter bank. You get 16 bands of spectral processing. Sort of on the one hand, it's a graphic EQ, on the other hand, it's a spectrum analyzer, another hand, it's a filter bank. You can use all of them. You can use odd or even bands. You can morph from one thing to another. You can turn it into envelopes. You can freeze stuff. A whole load of stuff. Apparently, it's very, very complicated and generally speaking will probably set your computer on fire. Now I do hope to get hold of this soon and have another bit of a deep dive into Softube Modular because I haven't looked at it for quite a while and a lot of new stuff has emerged. So I'm hoping to get stuck in there and have another bit of a look at some time soon. And so that should hopefully include this 296E, which is a legendary module. It's one of those legendary modules that you never ever get a chance to play on, I imagine. And you don't really know why it's legendary because you have no experience of how that really works. But, you know, as with a lot of synthesis and a lot of historical synthesis, you just have to get on board with it and accept the fact that there are historically interesting things going on in the world of synthesis that you're just never going to have any clue about. Now this is fascinating. It's called Berna 2.0 and it's an electronics lab. The idea is that you've just stumbled into some kind of bunker in the 1950s and discovered a bunch of signal equipment, stuff left over from the war, stuff that's been customized and built to create noises, because that's how electronic music started. It started from all these bits of old radio gear and signal gear and bits and pieces being brought together and customized by very clever and ingenious people. And Berna attempts to replicate that with far more authenticity than you really need, because it's quite hard to get sound out of, because you've got to, you know, do it properly. You've got to wire things together properly. It's a modular environment, the same as many things are. And so because of that, you've got to just think a little bit and then start playing. But as you do, as you start to unearth what this is all about, it gets fascinating. You can lose whole afternoons just fiddling about in here. Not necessarily getting music out, but you're getting sound out, interesting sound, weird sound. And that's always a useful thing to do when it's raining. I mean, it looks amazing. It really does. I mean, you've got oscillators in there, filters, tape recorders, mixers, modulators, the whole stuff, all the stuff you'd normally find in synthesis, just in a 1950s style. So before it was all made easy to use, before we understood exactly what was going on. So you've got scopes and stuff in there to show you the waveforms as well as your ears to let you know what on earth's going on, and mixers to bring it all together. Yeah, go and try it out. I mean, it costs $12, I think, and there's a trial version that you can use just to have a play. Well worth just checking out. If you've got nothing else to do, go and check that out. That's called Berna 2.0. Now, Brainworx and the Plugin Alliance talked at NAMM about their forthcoming VST instruments, and they told us absolutely nothing about them at all. But hooray, the first one has come along. Now, Brainworx are famous for their analog modeling of effects, of vintage effects and classic effects, all of those sorts of bits of old gear they have modeled brilliantly, and we all benefit from those sorts of plugins. So when they're turning that expertise onto synthesis, it's likely that they're going to produce something pretty awesome. So what they've kicked off with is an Oberheim classic, the SEM, the Synthesizer Expander module. It's that weird creamy white thing with the knobs on that looks like a bit of scientific equipment. But this is great. They've taken their weirdo modeling technology, which models all those things like the inaccuracies and imperfections in things, and drift and temperature changes and all that kind of lovely stuff that we love about hardware and analog components. They've modeled all of that with algorithms and software, and it's that which they are bringing into this first instrument. What that means is it's got tons of variation in it, tons of realism and authenticity in it, and it sounds pretty awesome. They've pushed the polyphony up to 32 voices, and they've put in a whole bunch of stomp box type effects, of course, of their famous modeled variety. And it includes the apparently infamous air band from Maag. No, I don't know what that is either. But that sounds pretty exciting. I've had a quick go, and it does sound really, really nice. They've retained the good and simple interface as well. They're stuck in an arpeggiator. It's also NKS compatible, so you can stick it into complete control and get your NKS compatible keyboard straight onto those knobs, which is nice. They're calling it the BX_Oberhausen. I hope you don't have to say that every time we talk about it. Can we just call it the Oberhausen? I hope so. Dove Audio have their second module up on Kickstarter, just sort of in time for Superbooth, I guess, and this one is called a Waveplane Oscillator. It's kind of vector synthesis. The idea being you've got a vector XY vector pad. I don't know, you've got a square, right? And in each corner you put a wavetable, and then you've got a dot, and it moves about, and you go over here and you go over here, and it balances a mix between those four spaces. That sounds an awful lot like the spherical wavetable oscillator thing, but in two dimensions rather than 3 dimensions. Anyway, 4 wavetables, a dot, move about, morph between these different sounds. That's the idea. So this is really vector synthesis, but of course it's in Eurorack, so you've got stacks of modulation. You can plug some CV in and move that dot around between all sorts of different places. You can also modulate which wavetable waveform is available within each of the corners as you go. So they can change in the corners as well as this changing about here. Lots of modulation. There's some FM and sync stuff going on as well. Lots of stuff. The Waveplane Oscillator hasn't quite funded yet on Kickstarter, so if you're interested, go and check that out. They've only got a couple of weeks to run. And it would be a real shame if it didn't end up getting produced, because it looks like a really interesting module. Back to the world of software. Modular then, Reaktor 6.3 and their blocks update. This is quite a huge update to Reaktor, although it's only a little incremental one as far as native instruments are concerned. But in terms of the accessibility and usability of their blocks platform, this is huge. What have they done? Well, they've taken the patching and stuck it on the front. On the front, I tell you, on the front panel. Who would have believed it? I don't know. I mean, are propeller heads watching this? Patching on the front. What a novel idea. So previously with Reaktor blocks, it's great. Reaktor blocks is you've got these different modules in a modular Eurorack style, although it's not in that sort of format, but it's in that kind of idea. And you can create these wonderful modular synthesis bits going on. But in order to edit the presets or to design your own preset, you had to drop back to the behind the scenes Reaktor, which is all these little tiny blocks of tiny text and tiny wires connecting everything together. And it's a little bit hardcore. I mean, you just to look at it, you just go, well, either your reaction is, oh wow, look at this, I can really get to grips with it. Or, oh my God, what is this? This is gonna, I don't even know where to start. And that's always sort of been my reaction to it. It's like, oh, I just don't have the head for this at the moment. I prefer things just to be bigger. Whereas the Reaktor stuff is always just so weeny and small. And no, it doesn't do anything for me in that regard. But now they put the patching on the front, so you can now patch directly on what you're doing and see where it's going and see the effect that it has on the GUI all at the same time. Now I've done a nice big video about this that I did at the Tone and Synth Reaktor, which will take you through the very basics of the new blocks and how that works and how easy it is to use, which is great. Now there is a little bit of weirdness associated with it in that it doesn't seem to apply itself to the previous blocks versions. This is kind of a new block version. It's called Blockspace, which is free. Anyone can use it. You get a bunch of modules and you can start patching them together in the Reaktor blocks player, and off you go for free. Great. And then there's Blocks Prime, which has a whole load more modules in it for people who want to pay a bit of money towards it, or who have the full version of Reaktor, because then it becomes free within that. It's also a platform for third parties to release modules for it as well. But as I say, it doesn't seem to take the previous version. If you look at previous presets and bits and pieces, that loads up without the front panel patching, which is a little bit annoying. You kind of thought it would have taken all that in, but maybe that will come in time. I don't know. It also, at the moment, it doesn't take user modules that have been made previously either. So there's a bit of a change going on here, not entirely sure what that's all about, but all I can say about the software itself is that it's great, it's fun, it's really released Reaktor blocks into being a space in which you can create your own stuff far, far easier. There's a new hardware sequencer on the block, and it's come from a surprising place. It's come from Pioneer DJ. I mean, for heaven's sake, I mean, from Pioneer DJ, you expect to get, you know, CD scratching things and mixing desks and those kind of performance scratch mixers and stuff. But a year or so ago, they released the Toraiz AS1 little mono synth, which was an awesome little mono synth, but quite expensive. But that's because it had like a genuine Jupiter 6 filter in there or something like that. And then they released a sampler, the SP16, which again seemed quite expensive, but seemed really interesting. But this had a Dave Smith Instruments filter in it as well, which explained a bit of the price, I guess. So these were two products that seemed a little bit out of character for a DJ company, but you know, they could fit in because DJs are expanding into a lot more hardware stuff these days, and the proliferation of hardware and desktop stuff means that they can. It's much easier to incorporate synthesizers and samplers and groove boxes and stuff into a bit of a DJ set. Interesting, blurring those lines between performer, DJ, musician. Ooh, maybe, we shall see. But anyway, what they've just released right now, today in fact, is the Toraiz SQUID. I mean, what a great name, SQUID. That's a fantastic name for anything. Everything should be called SQUID, I think. And this is a hardware sequencer. It's a multi-track hardware sequencer, a multi-track polyphonic hardware sequencer that can connect to MIDI, USB, and CV. It's got 16 tracks in there, 64 patterns, 64 steps, 8 voices, and a whole load of really interesting and creative performance features. It's laid out a bit like an MPC. It's got a 4x4 pad which runs everything, which is not my favourite form of sequencing. Sequencing that goes down in rows like that, I find personally a little bit annoying, but for lots of other people, machine users, Groovebox users, MPC users out there, it's the perfect workflow for everything because it allows you to do everything. Drum kits, sequencing, phrase, looping, bits and pieces. Yeah, it can work. It can work. So I'm going with it. But this sequencer is immense. You can control everything within it. You've got step sequencing, sure, yeah, but you've got velocity per step, you've got scales, you've got melodic modulations, you've got speed modulations, you've got groove modulations where you can groove it in and out, you can send it forward, you can send it backwards, you can slow down individual tracks while other tracks just keep on going. It's got randomization you can put in everywhere, it's got probability or perhaps even improbability to throw in over everything, so it's sometimes on and sometimes off, adding those human flavors, and it's very much designed to be an on-the-fly sequence and perform all at once kind of box. You can harmonize stuff, you can create chords, you can transpose, you can do beat repeats and ratcheting and all sorts of stuff. You can record CV controller numbers to each of the steps, 5 of those, and send those out to all your stuff. It has 2 MIDI ports out the back, so you can have 16 channels on one, 16 channels on another, although you've only got 16 tracks in total, but it just means it makes it easier for you to connect to other stuff. The USB port is a B port, so it's for connecting to a computer, but that means you can then sequence VST instruments as well, if you liked. I would have liked to have seen it having USB-A ports, so you could plug USB things into it directly, but you know, hey ho, never mind. I mean, particularly a MIDI controller keyboard, be able to plug it in via USB would be handy, but never mind, you've got MIDI input, so you can use that as well, so you don't have to play melodies using the pad, you can plug in a keyboard and do that. I mean, it looks like, you know, a regular groove box, but inside it's got a whole load of possibilities. I don't think, because of its nature, the fact that it's a Pioneer DJ thing, it does look a little bit DJ, it looks a little bit MPC and very much about electronic dance music, and that's that's fine, but I don't think it has to be that. I mean, if you compare it to something like the Polyend, which is this beautiful tinkling light waves of stuff and things going along, that very much appeals to the aesthetic of something like Eurorack, whereas this doesn't quite so much. You know, it's a proper kind of bash machine, slap that down, gonna make some beats, gonna make some electronic sounds. Yeah, it perhaps doesn't have the elegance that we like to see a little bit more of in synthesis and in Eurorack, but the fact that it has 2 lots of CV gate output means that it can run your whole show, and I don't think we should be discouraged necessarily by the fact it doesn't look as cool as you'd like it to. I think it has an enormous amount of potential. I would love to get my hands on one and to try it out just with the gear that I've got. That could be great, could be great. And also it's surprisingly affordable. It's only around about 500 quid, which is, you know, a lot less than the sampler version was and around the sort of price of the AS1. So it's more of a realistic price for this sort of product, which is very interesting. We have a new module from Erica Synths called the Black Double Bass. Interesting. What does that do then? Well, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but it takes an incoming signal from your oscillator. You've got your oscillator, a little weedy, you know, triangle wave coming in to it, and what it does is it adds 2 sub basses to it. Stick your signal in, sub basses come out. So it immediately beefs up whatever weedy little oscillator you've poked in there with these subs, either 1 octave, 2 octave below, which you can mix between and there's separate outputs for, or you can just take the mix out. There's also a filter in there for colouring the sound, making it brighter, making it duller. And it splits everything out into individual outputs, or a mix output of a dry and wet knob to balance out exactly what it is you want to hear. Great, I mean, it's simple. It's devastatingly simple. I mean, I guess somehow it's extrapolating pitch information from the incoming signal and then using that to create these subs for it. They're transistor based, but sound flipping fat and awesome. It also does crazy things with percussion because, you know, the slight lack of pitch information there, I suppose, is just going to create a different effect. So it's really interesting and just sounds like a great way to beef up any sound at any point. You should probably have a whole rack of them to put everything through. Everything needs sub bass, I think. And finally, we have the sad news that Mike McGrath, the man behind the Muff Wiggler forum, has sadly passed away. The internet is full of tributes to the man, and by all accounts he seems like a really fabulous guy. The Muff Wiggler forum that he founded is an enormous resource of knowledge and information and community. I mean, it's the sort of place that you could ask any question about any part of Eurorack that you could possibly think of, and people will line up to give you an answer. I mean, it's far more than that. It's not just a place of information. It's also became a place of community. It's a place where people connected, particularly early on in the burgeoning growth of Eurorack. It's a sort of place where like-minded people found each other and were able to start those conversations that have created, absolutely pushed forward Eurorack and other hardware synthesis that we all enjoy today. Muff Wiggler has had an absolute fundamental place in the story and journey of almost everyone who's been involved in Eurorack. When I started my journey a couple of years ago, it's one of the places that I went and asked questions and got decent responses for. It's still a place that I use for, you know, answering technical queries and searching through to try to find the answer to something I'm trying to work out. It's a phenomenal place. I mean, it's also had its problems. I mean, I've been critical of it myself because of the nature of the forum, the way it's presented. The name doesn't really resonate these days, but nothing at all can take away from the enormous impact that that place and that community has had on synthesis in general. It's a very sad day for the synthesis community. Right, so that's it. That'll do. That's this month sewn up. Next month, of course, we are going to be heading into Superbooth in a couple of weeks. I'm going along for a day, but the rest of the time I'll be writing it all up for gearnews.com. So if you want to follow what's new and exciting from the show, then do head over to Gear News for all of my latest information. And if you want to see what it is that I see while I'm at Superbooth, then do follow me on Instagram, where I'll be posting whatever pictures and bits and pieces I come across. This Sunday we'll be having a live stream, 8 PM British Summer Time, or whatever it is time scale that we're in these days, on Sunday the 28th of May, 8 o'clock. That's this Sunday coming up, and we can talk about all these latest products, or we can make some music together. I was going to do that, wasn't I? We can get together and talk about all these latest products, or you could come and collaborate on a bit of music with me. What do I mean? Well, there's this app called Endless. I've mentioned it before, it's from Tim Exile, and the idea is a collaboration thing where you create loops on your iPhone and you're connected to other people. They create loops and you work on each other's loops and you create stuff, and it has sounds and beats and bits and pieces in it, and you get to some kind of musical nirvana through the use of collaboration in your phone. I don't know that I'm selling it really well, but in the description, all being well, is going to be a link. If you click on that link, if you have an iPhone or iPad, some kind of iOS device, you can install the Endless app, which is still in beta, it's still not officially released, but with the invitation you can go and install the app and you'll be invited to my jam. I don't know, it's my jam, who knows? And within that you can start collaborating with me and other people invited in creating some tunes. It's great. I mean, click the link, go and install it, go and have a play. You can do a solo jam or you can join in with other people's jams, I suspect. But with the link below, hopefully you'll get invited to mine. If you don't, then just get in touch and I can send you a personal invitation. And then during the live stream on Sunday, we'll give it a go. I don't quite understand yet how the audio is going to work. How am I going to let everybody hear this via a live stream while other people are collaborating? Because the live stream is always about 20 seconds behind the actual thing. So if you're listening to it on your phone trying to collaborate, you're not going to be able to listen to me at the same time because it could be, oh, I don't know. Anyway, I've no idea quite how that's going to work, but we'll give it a go. We'll give it a go, we'll open it up, we'll have a look, we'll see if we can make some music together. Might be fun. I don't know. I really don't know. But let's give it a go. So the link is down there. Something to do with Endless, something to do with an app on your phone. We'll give it a go. We'll work it in, see what happens. So that's this Sunday, 8 o'clock, and we'll drink some beer and talk about stuff like we like to. So that'll do, I think. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.